podcasting's choice. From coast to coast, continent to continent, right here 24/7.
PNR.
Now entering the PNRNetworks arena, coming down the aisle from Revere, Massachusetts, weighing in at absolutely none of your business. It's the Mistress of Mayhem, the Queen of Quips. It's time for Ring Around the Rosie with your hostess, Kim Brown.
Hey everybody, welcome to another week here on Ring Around the Rosie. I am your host, Kim Brown, aka Platinum Rose Lady, and I hope everybody's having a terrific day today on January 16th, 2019. Happy 2019, folks! This is just so exciting. We're in a new year full of promise and exciting stuff and all that, and you know, we're looking forward to a great year starting off, and so far it's been different. I mean, it's been kind of crazy because our computer died. We had been recording one of our shows and we finished and it just died. If you're waiting for me to go into some big complicated technic thing about talking about technical stuff and computer jargon and all that, you're in for a long wait because I don't know anything about that shit. Nothing. My husband, TC, who I've mentioned on this show before because he is an awesome person, puts up with my craziness and basically puts this show together. Is the computer genius in our household. I am not. I mean, if I can turn the computer on and not have the blue screen of death pop up, I'm like, yay, it's a good day. So our computer died, so we had to get that whole situation rectified. But now I am sitting here before you, ready to start off 2019 shows here and, get really serious. Well, not really serious because I don't ever want to be very, very serious on my show. I want to have fun, and just be crazy and silly and hopefully give you guys a laugh out there. This week I thought I would do something kind of different. I'm going to talk about animals in wrestling. Animals that have been part of wrestling gimmicks, animals that have been part of wrestling matches, and just pretty much anything I can think of that pops into my deranged little hamster wheel of a brain that has to do with animals, because I am an animal person. I like animals a lot. Some people have said that I like animals better than I like people, and to be honest, I do. I mean, I feel more comfortable around animals than I do around people because animals don't lie to you. Animals aren't cruel to you for the sake of being cruel. And if you give them love and affection, they will give it back to you. Most animals. I mean, certain animals I would be like, oh, that's a really pretty, spitting cobra, but I'm going to admire it from way the fuck over here. I always liked animals growing up as a kid, and I was always that one kid that would I wasn't like other girls. I never have been, doing frou-frou frilly girly things. And if you are a girl and you like frou-frou frilly girly things, that's fine. But, girls are supposed to be afraid of spiders and snakes and stuff like that. And I gotta be honest, I wouldn't be real happy if somebody flung a spider on me. But for the most part, I don't mind them. I think snakes are beautiful. I think they're beautiful, beautiful animals. And they're not slimy, so anybody who tells you they are is lying. And I just always loved animals. I love dogs and cats and other things that people don't give love to, like alligators. I think they're cool. And I just like animals more than people, but not all people, because I like some people. I like you guys, because you guys listen to my show. And it's really weird, because you don't think of animals and wrestling as having much in common, but they actually do. Besides the fact that there are people out there who have animal-based nicknames, which I'll get to later, you've had things that have happened in wrestling which nowadays, under the harsh light of, 2019, you do kind of have to look back on and go, Ooh, gosh, that's, wow. One of those things was the fact that for a while, wrestling involved bears. There were certain states, that it was allowed that people could get in the ring and wrestle a bear. This is not allowed in certain states any longer. Since 2006, actually, the practice? We'll go with practice of bear wrestling has been made illegal or banned in 20 states in the United States, which I'm like, well, that's a good thing. Most of the time, actually, as far as I know, all of the time, whenever they did these things where they had bears wrestling people, which they would have people from the audience. And as far as I know, these weren't plants. These were actually people who were stupid enough to get in the ring with a bear. That is an incredibly bad idea. Now, granted, the bears most of the time were declawed, which is a horrible thing to do to any animal, much less a bear. I am firmly in the camp of fuck declawing. That's a terrible thing to do. And also the bear was muzzled, which fucking makes sense because it's a fucking bear. You know, they've got great whopping big teeth and they've got very powerful jaws. And for those of you who don't know, bears are omnivorous. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, I'm going to spare you a trip to dictionary.com. Omnivorous means bears eat anything. Guess what? You qualify as anything. So they would actually have people, and these were I'm assuming these were smaller feds and things like that, like the whole traveling carnival kind of thing with wrestling back in the day, that they would have people that, wanted to prove how manly they were, and they would wrestle the bear, and if they won, if they pinned the bear, they would get money. They'd actually be given a prize of money. I have no information about what would happen if the bear won. I'm kind of like, so if you pin the bear, you get money. What happens if the bear pins you? I mean, do you have that scene from The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio? I hope you don't, because that, yuck. And they also have used bears in matches with professional wrestlers who you think would have more sense, but whatever. And they would have the bears wrestle in battle royals or handicap matches and things like that. And these were actually usually done so the bear would win. Okay, because well, first of all, who in their right fucking mind is going to be able to throw a damn bear over the top rope? How does that look like it's not going to end in tragedy? I'm like, what? When I started doing research about this topic, I was like, a battle royal with a bear in it. Oh gosh, this has litigation written all over it. It was actually quite popular in the 1960s and the 1970s, mostly in the southern part of the United States, and I will not comment any further on that. I've heard of this, and I actually remember reading a book a very long time ago about a wrestling family that it was a fictional book, and they talked about wrestling bears and stuff like that, and wow. This whole thing has made me extremely uncomfortable to read about, and I can't even picture watching something like this, because I would be sitting there cheering for the bear. I know me. I know how I am. If I went to a bullfight, I'd be cheering my brains out for the bull. I'd just be like hoping the bear broke somebody in half, because fuck people sometimes. There have been other animals that have been wrestled with, which is, such a terrible idea. One of them was, legendary promoter, wrestler, wrestling patriarch. I can't come up with any other accolades any higher. Stu Hart, who actually, this one just floored me when I was doing research. the territory that he had in Canada was obviously the famous Stampede Wrestling, which everybody's heard of. And he actually wrestled a tiger. And I'm not talking about a little tiger either. I'm not talking about like a cub or a juvenile tiger. This was an actual frickin' tiger, back in the late 60s. And this just completely freaks me out. I've actually seen a picture. There's a picture on Wikipedia of him wrestling this tiger. This is a Bengal tiger that was named, it was called Sasha. I guess Chi-Chi was its nickname, her nickname, his nickname. I don't know. I don't know if it was a tiger or a tigress, to be honest with you. I would assume with a name like Sasha, that means it would be female. I don't know. I might be wrong. The wrestling matches that he would have with the tiger, oh gosh, that is a sentence I never thought I'd say. There was a two-prong thing happening with this. This was partially to put over the whole Calgary Stampede, which is a big deal. And it was also partially done on, in conjunction with the Calgary Fish and Wildlife Association, which I guess is good, I suppose, maybe. Although, to be perfectly honest, and I don't mean to nitpick, I'm sorry, the last time I checked, tigers were not indigenous to Canada. I mean, maybe I missed something in school. Goodness knows I missed a whole bunch of stuff. But I'm just kind of thinking to myself, okay, let's think of animals that we think of when we think of Canada. We think of bears, and we think of beavers, and we think of moose, and maybe reindeer. Tigers, no, not really. It's never really, I'm like, why? Why? If the whole concept of a bear wrestling is one of these things that just kind of makes you go, ugh. The idea of getting in the ring with an actual fucking tiger, no. Not in a million years, not if you paid me, not if I got a rub down afterwards from Jared Padalecki. No. Well, maybe the rub down part, but still, I'm sorry, because if nothing else, if nothing's been taught to us by history, tigers are beautiful animals. Tigers are beautiful, magnificent, gorgeous, strong, dangerous animals. And even if you raise them from when they're itty bitty little tiger kittens, which are really freaking adorable, when they grow up to be, 1,000-pound, mounds of sinew and bone and claw and teeth and stuff like that, if they decide they don't like you anymore, or they're tired of playing or whatever, one big old swat to the head is not going to feel real good and might possibly, separate your head from your body, or at the least really F you up. Case in point, Siegfried and Roy. Now you'd think all of that would be enough about the whole idea of people wrestling animals for the enjoyment of people that want to watch that kind of stuff, and I have no idea who that would be. But actually, you'd be wrong. Bruno Sammartino, WWF legend Bruno Sammartino, actually at one point wrestled an orangutan. The human being, folks. Sometimes I think the human being is the most dangerous animal on this planet. I honest to blog do. This match, we'll go with match, was 15 minutes in length, and Bruno was being paid $25 for each 5 minutes he stayed in there with the orangutan. Now, okay, there is so much that could have gone wrong with this. We may have actually never had Bruno Sammartino to enjoy his lengthy career if stuff had gone wrong. Because as far as I know, I've never heard of an orangutan attacking anybody. I don't know. I mean, it may happen. I actually don't know. As far as I know, they're very gentle creatures, and I can't even picture wrestling them because I can't picture you getting them that ticked off to actually wrestle you. But if that happened and they decided they want to mess with you, holy fuck, that could have gone wrong. I mean, I just can't even picture this. This is such a terrible idea. Bruno, to the surprise of nobody, when talking about this match, had talked about the fact that it was painful and it wasn't safe because, surprise, spoiler alert, this was not a trained orangutan. It was not a trained wrestling orangutan, which is just got to be one of the weirdest statements ever. But I'm just like, good grief, who thought this was smart? I just can't even picture the idea of somebody going, let's take that and put it in a ring with a human being and see what happens. What? I don't get it. I mean, if human beings want to kill themselves doing sports, that's one thing. But to bring an animal into it, I don't get it. I really don't. I mean, I mentioned bullfighting earlier, and I don't think that's a sport. I think that's horrifying. But, you know, different country, you got to respect their ways and stuff like that. But I'm in my country, and I'm just kind of like, ick, no. But, you know, so that's one place where animals have been involved in wrestling in regards to actually getting in the ring and wrestling somebody. And as far as I know, nobody's gotten killed doing it, and it's a miracle that happened. Animals have also been used as part of a wrestling match, and sometimes that has been a complete and utter disaster. Sometimes it has been less of a disaster, but it's been weird. Exceedingly weird. I'd like to bring up a couple of matches, actually 3 from Japan. And I know some people just went, oh boy. Now Japan, I want to bring up to anybody out there who is from Japan, who is hearing this podcast. And I'm sorry that I can't speak in Japanese, because as much as I'd love to, because your language is beautiful, I can barely speak English. So there's that. Japan is a beautiful country. It is a beautiful country. It has gorgeous scenery. They're technological wonder makers, and the people there are super nice and really awesome. And it's a beautiful country with a glorious history. That having been said, holy cow, when you guys lose your mind at wrestling, you lose your mind. Some of the most violent, shocking, oh my gosh, what the fuck did I just watch stuff I have seen from Japan. And God forgive me, I love it. God help me, I've watched some stuff from Japan that I've just been like, I need a cigarette, you know, and I don't smoke. So, that has nothing to do with the matches I'm about to talk about, though. But, you know, if you want to see some violent, crazy stuff, Japanese hardcore wrestling, good grief. But there's been a couple of matches where they have involved animals. Now, and these are usually animals that people would naturally be afraid of in the first damn place. At one point, we were very lucky that in a town that's pretty close to ours, Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is an awesome place. Cambridge, what up? Harvard Square was a place where you had all these cool little stores that were, you know, very eclectic and weird and stuff. And there still are some, you know, there's still some places out there. Unfortunately, not as many because progress. Bleh. And one of the stores that was there for a while was this place called Anime Crash. And holy crap, did I live in that store. I loved this store because it sold anime and figures, and it was just amazing, and I loved it, and I spent way too much money there. And one other thing that they sold there were wrestling tapes from Japan. Videotapes. Yes, I know, some people just went, what's a videotape? And to those people, ask your parents. So, a lot of these tapes, actually I think all the tapes we had, they were in Japanese. They had no subtitles. Some of the, you know, title things were in English. It wasn't the best English, but it was English. And so there was a lot of, okay, we kind of have to wing it. We kind of try and figure out what's going on and things like that. You know, who's the face, who's the heel, what's going on, that kind of thing. So it was kind of figure it out on the fly, but it worked. We both, my husband and I, figured it out pretty quickly. He's, oh, that's the face, that's the heel. Did they just blow up the ring? Stuff like that. One of the tapes was more of an amalgam of a bunch of matches. They kind of like started in the middle in some of them. So I don't remember the people involved in this, but it was a match with multiple people, multi-tag, partner match. And there were scorpions in the ring. There were like these live scorpions, and people were putting them in people's hair. And it wasn't as far as I can remember, it was not a cage match. And even if it was a cage match, they're fucking bugs. They're going to be able to get out of the cage and I really don't think it was a cage match. To which my point, my thing was, I remember sitting there going, okay, so you have a ring full of people and weapons and cactus, don't ask, and bugs. Well, arachnids. I know a scorpion is an arachnid. Don't yell at me. I'm like, what's to stop the scorpion from getting out of the ring and, I don't know, running into the crowd and causing a frickin' panic? Thankfully, I didn't see that happening. Although I have to be perfectly honest, the one time they did show one of the wrestlers picked up a scorpion by the tail, not like grasping it so he gets stung, and he put it on the other guy's head, and the scorpion just kind of sat there. I don't know what they thought it was going to do, because it was just kind of sitting there like, oh, I'm up here now. It didn't really do very much. I mean, other than the fact that, oh my God, there's a scorpion on the guy's head. Oh my God, what's going to happen next? And then the next thing somebody's getting hit in the face with a cactus and, Japan, da-da-da-da. But we did get to see two matches from, Big Japan Pro Wrestling. I think that was the name of the company. I was like, there's that name again. Both of them involving Mitsuhiro Matsunaga, one of the icons of Japanese hardcore wrestling, who also went by the name Mr. Danger. Now, somebody who goes by the nickname Mr. Danger, you get the feeling this is someone that has not a lot of respect for their body. And if they don't have a lot of respect for their body, they ain't gonna have jack shit for yours. So he was in two matches involving animals, both of them involving animals that most people would stay very far away from. One of them was in an alligator death match. Okay. This was Matsunaga going against Shadow WX. And so you have this match where there's weapons and a casket and an alligator. Now, the thing is, what we got from watching the show and kind of piecing it together, besides the fact that they actually had Matsunaga and the alligator talking to each other, as in they had Matsunaga talking and then they had the shots of the alligator and somebody talking for the alligator in this very kind of high-pitched Japanese voice that I'm sure was hilarious for the people who knew what was being said, because we're both sitting there going, is that supposed to be the alligator talking? Okay. And the other question was, we're both looking at each other like, do they even have alligators in Japan? Well, apparently they do, at least in the zoo or whatever. So the whole thing of this match between Shadow X and Mitsuhiro Matsunaga was that you had this match, and whoever lost the match then had to wrestle this alligator. So Matsunaga lost, and there's the alligator. The small alligator. The very, very small alligator. As in, I really don't think you could get a good pair of shoes out of this alligator, or maybe even a wallet. Possibly a wallet. And before anyone screams at me, that was a joke. I am not advocating, wearing fur or, wearing clothing from animal products or, that kind of deal. If you do it, great, but it's not my thing. I'm not a complete tree-hugging hippie, though. I do eat meat, so there's that. And the thing is, this alligator was actually really kind of adorable, to be honest with you. It's this little alligator, And It did not want to be there. This alligator was trying as hard as fucking possible to get the fuck out of that ring and go somewhere else. Anywhere else. I don't think it would have cared where it went at that point. I think it would have jumped in the water and swam to Florida if it could have. And Matsunaga's trying to get it to, he's provoking this alligator to fight with him. And everything he does, the alligator is like, let me out, let me out, let me out, let me out, let me out. It was exceedingly anticlimactic. And speaking of anticlimactic, that brings up the Piranha Death Match, which was actually more entertaining, on a completely, sadism level, I guess. We'll go with that. I don't know. I should be ashamed of myself. I know. Another match involving, Mitsuharu, Matsunaga, again. There's that name again. Whenever you see his name, you're like, oh crap, things are gonna go crazy. This time he was going against, Kendo Nagasaki. Now, the point of this match was that you had these guys who had, this rivalry going and all this, and the way they were gonna settle it was in the ring, and they're wrestling in the ring, and there's a decently sized tank of piranha in the ring with them. And the point of losing this match was you lost this match by bleeding and getting thrown into the piranha tank. Okay, so I'm assuming at this point Japan did not have something along the lines of the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. I don't know. They're fish, so I don't know if that counts or whatever. But it was gory. It was a bloody match. And at one point, Matsunaga's over the tank. He's not actually in the tank, and there's blood dripping off his head, and it's dripping into the water where the piranhas are. Now, piranha fish, have this terrible reputation, which they actually don't deserve. Piranhas, like every other thing in nature, has its place. They have their thing that they do. And that doesn't make them evil or terrible or anything like that. That's just them. That's what they do. This is why I get pissed off when people refer to the shark as the villain in Jaws. I know I'm an earthy, crunchy hippie, and you all have to deal with it. But my thing was that, piranha in the wild, they're scavengers. They usually, they clean up stuff that, dies and falls in the river and stuff like that, and they, jump on it and they eat it and then it's gone. Now, I'm not saying that feeding frenzies don't happen in these cases, and also the fact that piranha, if they don't have enough food, they will turn on each other and they will eat each other. Ick. But the thing is, when Matsunaga's over the tank and there's blood dripping down off his head, and the piranha are just kind of, oh, look at that. They're completely not giving a shit. They're just swimming around. Now, at one point, at the end of the match, Matsunaga actually gets thrown into the tank, and Nagasaki, to put the violent cherry on top of this sundae, takes a board that is covered on one side in barbed wire. Nice. Takes the board, barbed wire side down, of course, and puts it on top of the tank where Matsunaga and the piranha are inside said. So everybody's freaking out. The announcers are losing their minds in Japanese, so I have no idea what they're saying. And we can see inside the tank, and Matsunaga's kind of thrashing around as much as he can. It's a large tank, but it's not that large. And the piranha, for the most part, are acting like, if you had a microphone in there and you could speak piranha, that the piranha would have been like, there's a man on me, get him off. They were completely trying to do everything but bite Matsunaga. But it was brought up by some people who were either there or had better views than we did, that there were a couple of bite marks on Matsunaga's chest. Now, I'm not saying this, I know, my gosh, it sounds so terrible that I'm saying this in a way like I wanted to see the man be eaten down to the bone. I certainly didn't want to do that. My big concern, and again, this is me, my big concern when he went into the tank was, oh my gosh, he's going to squish those poor little fish. Because piranhas are not that big. These weren't that big. They were, maybe about the body-wise, they were about the size of a coaster, maybe. And all I'm thinking is, this guy's in there with a whole bunch of fish, and he's stepping on them and elbowing them and kneeing them, and those poor little fish. And my husband's looking at me like, the poor little fish. You mean the poor little piranha fish? And I'm like, yeah, they have a right to live too. And he's just like, he's like, are you going to enjoy the violence or not? I'm like, well, I was until he started, like elbowing the fish and falling on them and shit. It was less of a disappointment than the alligator death match in regards to the fact that at least the piranha weren't trying to jump out of the tank. But it was another example of, we're going to hype the crap out of something, because they showed all these pictures of piranha before the match, all these still shots of piranha, and, their teeth, and they look so scary, and all this stuff like that. And I'm like, dude, they're just fish. It's like something else that I'm like, I'm reasonably sure piranha fish are not indigenous to Japan. Same with alligators. But people, I guess they just decided, let's go for something scary. Those are scary. We'll get them. I guess, I don't know. Of course, you can't talk about the whole idea of let's get animals involved in something where it just went absolutely, totally, utterly wrong, and not talk about the Kennel from Hell match from the WWF at the time, which was a match between the Big Boss Man and Al Snow. It was a match for the Hardcore Championship, and also for Al attempting to gain vengeance against the Boss Man for what happened earlier before the pay-per-view, weeks before the pay-per-view. This was from Unforgiven 1999. So a little backstory, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. Sit down. It's going to get really ridiculous. For a while, Al Snow was coming out to the ring with a dog, his dog, it was a Chihuahua. I'm assuming it was actually his dog, named Pepper. And at one point, Big Boss Man, who by now was a heel and was this really terrible heel and did all these awful things, at one point kidnapped the dog. Dog-napped the dog? We'll go with that. He, withheld the dog from Al, and Al was frantic because Pepper was his little friend and all this stuff like that. It culminated in Boss Man having Al come to his hotel room and serving him a meal, which he revealed was, as he referred to it, pepper steak. The implications obviously being that he murdered Al's dog and served it to him. So apparently somebody in the WWE writing crew at the time hates dogs and read Titus Andronicus in high school, and it stuck with them. Google it. This pushed Al, who has never been the sanest, Al's never been the sharpest crayon in the box, and it pushed him completely over the edge. And we had this match at Unforgiven 99, but it wasn't just going to be any old match. This was going to be a Kennel from Hell match to avenge the fallen Pepper. Now, for those of us who were all going, what the hell are they talking about? As it turned out, this was a steel cage match that had another cage. It was the Hell in the Cell match, basically, with another cage around the cage. And in between there was going to be these vicious guard dogs. They were going to be all these vicious dogs that were going to be between the actual ring and the cell door. And it was going to be, this army of Rottweilers is basically what they were going for. These vicious dogs that were going to be bloodthirsty and ready to tear people apart. And they showed all these pictures of angry dogs, snarling, and their mouths all full of big sharp teeth and stuff like that. And they made it a point to show dogs that people usually think of as vicious dogs. Pit bulls, Rottweilers, dogs like that. First of all, I would like to bring up and call bullshit and fuckery on that, because my late brother-in-law owned a pit bull. His name was Samson. And Samson was one of the loveliest dogs in the entire freaking universe and an enormous cuddle bug. And he was just fantastic. Some friends of mine had a Rottweiler puppy named Xena. She was called Xena Warrior Puppy. And she was just a sweetie among sweeties. Would lick you to death before she'd even think about biting you, and would try and climb in your lap when she was way beyond the lap dog puppy stage, but she was just adorable. So this whole thing, I was like, these dogs really don't act like this in real life unless you push them that way. I am a firm believer in the statement, there are no bad dogs, there are only bad people. And there are people out there who do train dogs to be vicious in, when they put them in dog fights and things like that. And these are people who should, I'm actually not going to say what should happen to them, but other than the fact that I really wish, I read about things like that and it really makes me wish Ghost Rider was real. Anyway, or the Punisher. Either way, I don't care. The thing is, so they hyped the heck out of this match, and they had the dogs there. I mean, there were actual dogs in between the cages, and they were big dogs. I mean, these were not little dogs. These were big honking dogs. They were also the most mellow, nut-caring dogs I've ever seen. The dogs just were doing what dogs do. They were, peeing and pooping and mating. You had these, and they weren't shy about showing it on camera either. You had these dogs out there just doing what dogs do. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. It was so embarrassing. I mean, a couple of times the dogs barked and the announcers made it sound like, oh my gosh, these dogs are going to snap and go off their leads and tear somebody's throat out. Yeah, that didn't happen. I felt bad for the dogs because I just kind of was thinking the reason they were, peeing and acting that way, I thought they were nervous. I thought they might have been nervous because of the crowd and the noise and all that stuff like that. I think they were probably scared. That's probably why they were acting that way. It was an awful idea. And unsurprisingly, it has never happened again. Isn't that a shock? Something that did happen again a few times, not a awful lot, but it did happen, and it did involve animals, was the hog pen match. Now, the hog pen match is not quite as bad as it sounds most of the time. It involves wrestlers wrestling usually near a hog pen or a pig pen with pigs in it. Now, usually what happens is the first time I ever remember this was when they had a match with Henry Godwinn against Triple H, and this is back when he was still Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the snob from Greenwich, and I think, if I remember right, Hunter won the match, but he still wound up in the pig pen, and he was like flailing around and flopping all over the place, and there was mud and pig crap and all this stuff like that. To be honest with you, I would be more worried about being out there with pigs than I would with dogs. The reason I bring that up is because of a movie that I watched called Snatch. It's not that kind of movie, calm down. It's a British gangster movie, and there's a scene where one of the gangsters, this really terrible guy, is talking about getting rid of a dead body using pigs, that pigs will eat anything, including people. They go through bone and they're, this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, wow. Pigs are a lot more dangerous than you think they are. I mean, because you see a pig, it's just, it's a pig. It's this little cute little pig. I mean, I know some pigs are, enormous, but they don't seem like they could be that dangerous. But the way they were talking in this movie, I was like, damn, those wrestlers were putting their lives in their hands if these things decided to walk up and take a finger off or something like that, I guess. Who knew? This is one of those things you're like, wow, I never knew that. People have used, wrestlers have also had mascots, or however you want to word it, as part of their gimmick, where they would come down to the ring with an animal, and sometimes it was, oh, that's so cute, and sometimes it was, at least for some people it was, usually for me it was like, oh, wow, that's awesome, you'll know who I'm talking about in a minute. Obviously, the first people you have to think of when it comes to that kind of a deal would be the British Bulldogs, the tag team of Davey Boy Smith and the Dynamite Kid. They started out, when they started this whole gimmick with bringing a bulldog with them, they had a female bulldog named Matilda. And later on, Matilda was farmed out, I guess, for lack of a better word. And they brought in another bulldog named Winston, which actually is probably the most British name I could ever think of. And, the whole bulldog thing, because people think of, bulldogs are kind of like the symbol of Britain and stuff like that. It makes me kind of sad when I've read stories about how the Bulldog and Dynamite, their reputation for backstage stuff, where they were involved in like some of these ribs that were really harassment, and that sometimes people would try and get back at them by feeding stuff to Matilda to make her have intestinal problems and things like that. Not cool. Not cool. I mean, I don't think anybody did it because they thought they were going to hurt the dog. They were just trying to inconvenience the Bulldogs, and hopefully they didn't physically take it out on Matilda. I've never heard anything to that respect, so I'm just saying. But obviously, one of the more famous people out there, I've mentioned already, Al Snow having a Chihuahua named Pepper for a while. One of the most famous cases of people using an animal and getting more over when they had an animal with them, was Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake the Snake, actually, it's weird because he had the nickname Jake the Snake before he came to the WWF, because he was so devious and sneaky and evil and stuff like that, and he liked it that way. He didn't actually get the snake until he came to work for Vince McMahon. Jake's actually gone on record saying when he started it, he didn't like it. He was afraid of snakes. He first started with a snake named Damien, which I believe was a python. I've heard different things, python, boa constrictor, which I know was a constricting snake. And, his whole thing was, usually fighting against, enhancement talent. He'd drop them in the DDT and then take Damien out of the bag that he was in and place him on his unconscious victims. Sometimes he would even place Damien in the person's mouth, which is a miracle that the snake didn't just go, oh, goody, nom, and just bite the crap out of somebody. But, Damien actually, it's really weird because Jake was a heel when they first brought him in, and, this very evil heel, and had the snake named after the Antichrist. So, of course, people were like, oh, bad guy, and little kids were afraid of the snake, and they hyped the snake up on TV and stuff like that. When Jake became a face, Damien stayed Damien because snakes don't give a shit. Snakes don't care. It was interesting when he did become a face that people still cheered for him, and they'd still go they'd cheer for Jake, and then Damien would come out and the cheer would kind of dip a little bit and then start up again, because people are still like, yay, you're awesome, now we like you. Oh fuck, there's the snake, but we still like you. You're awesome, yay. I remember going to the one show that I went to, the one wrestling show I went to with my dad, at the Boston Garden. And Jake was on the card, and he had Damien, and he let him out of the bag. And I remember, people around me were losing their minds. You have to understand, this is back in the 80s in New England, and exotic pets were just beginning to become a thing. So people weren't used to seeing, people in Boston probably weren't used to seeing snakes, never mind a snake that damn big. And Damien was a big boy. And I remember my eyes just lit up like it was Christmas. And I was just like, oh gosh, Dad, isn't that awesome? Isn't that the best looking snake you've ever seen? Blah, blah, blah. And I look at my dad's looking at me with this look on his face like, this is the weird one. We've got the younger daughter who's the sweet little cheerleader type and everybody's favorite and, little blonde angel. And then we've got this one. We got the weird ones, the older one, I worked damn hard for that reputation in my family. Unfortunately, Damien wasn't as long for this world as we would like because he was kayfabe killed by Earthquake, who crushed him and then served him up as snake burgers. Blah. Jake recovered pretty quickly from this and wound up with a larger snake named Lucifer. Just to hammer home the idea that snakes are evil, thank you, we get it! At least, sir. See, my whole thing is I've always loved snakes. I think snakes are beautiful animals. I had a friend that had an albino corn snake, and it was this sweetest, nicest snake. And I've always liked snakes, and people are always like, ew, why do you like snakes? They're gross. And I'm always like, if we didn't have snakes, we'd be up to our armpits in rats. So then people tend to shut up. So, it's all part of the circle of life. So the thing is, we wound up with Lucifer, and we also at one point had another snake. I remember Jake having this snake that I can't find a lot of information about. I remember seeing might have been on a magazine cover of a snake that he had called Revelations. And it was either an albino python or a boa constrictor. I don't remember which, but oh my gosh, this was a magnificent animal. I just remember thinking, that snake is amazing. I would want that snake. Except for the fact that I've always been of the opinion, this is just a personal rule of mine, you don't have to follow it, it's just me. Don't have pets that can grow up to be longer than you. That's just my thing. Don't own an animal that's either going to grow longer or taller or bigger than you and might someday, snap while you're trying to feed it and then try and eat you. And yes, that has happened. There's also there's a couple of other snakes to bring up that are also involved with Jake. Surprise. One of them, I'm going to bring this up simply for the silly factor because it was just so ridiculous. When Jake turned heel again, it was kind of a back and forth. The thing is, Jake would turn heel and then would turn even worse heel. The whole thing where he was trying to, I'll go with tutor? Mentor? We'll go with mentor. Where he was mentoring the Ultimate Warrior to try and help him overcome his fears of dealing with the Undertaker. This is after the Undertaker locked the Warrior in a casket and all this stuff like that. And at the end of all of these training sessions that seem to come straight out of a martial arts movie, i.e. the mentor treating the student like dirt, Warrior was locked in a room with some kind of a container, and out of the container popped this cobra, Dr. Evil quotes, that bit him, and the whole thing was Jake standing over him being like, I'm a snake, never trust a snake. Okay, that's really species-centric. I'd like to bring that up. Rude. But I mean, it was so obviously not a real cobra. I mean, a 5-year-old could see this was not a real cobra. That, however, was nothing compared to the time that Jake brought out a very real cobra. I've also heard this cobra was named Lucifer. I don't know how accurate that is. It could have been named Kenny for all I know. All I know is it's a fucking cobra, fuck that noise. Now the thing is, this was when he was involved in a very nasty feud with the late, great Macho Man Randy Savage. I mean, this feud got ugly. I remember one of the things happening as Jake slapping the lovely Miss Elizabeth, and people lost their damn minds. I mean, people were ready to just rip Jake Roberts limb from limb. Ironically, the whole Savage Roberts feud is what turned the Undertaker face originally back in the day. Look it up. At one point during this feud, Savage got tied up in the ropes, and Jake, being the evil McBad guy he was at this point, goes to his bag of tricks and pulls out a cobra. Now, this is an obviously not fake cobra. This is a very real cobra. As it turned out, it was a devenomed cobra. I don't give a shit. It's still a fucking cobra. And he proceeded to put said cobra on Randy Savage's arm, trying to get it to bite Savage, as they were trying to kayfabe say that the cobra was, fully venomated and was going to, kill Savage if he bit him and all this stuff like that, basically. And, Vince McMahon and Roddy Piper were having aneurysms on the mic. And the snake bit Savage quite a few times, I think. But the last time it bit him, it held on. The snake decided, nope, I ain't letting go. Fuck all y'all. I'm just going to stay right the fuck here. It took Jake a little bit of prying to finally get the snake off of Savage. Now, this did not happen on a pay-per-view. You have to understand, this happened on a regular old episode of the WWE program, well, WWF back then, programming at the time. People lost their damn minds. I remember seeing it and going, I don't know if I'm horrified or amazed. I'm just hoping the snake's okay. I did find out Savage actually wound up having to go to the hospital with a fever, and it was, as far as I know, it was still I don't know if it was because of the, there was no venom in the snake, but, it's still, it's an animal biting you, and that's not a good thing. And so Savage wound up in the hospital, and the cobra actually died 12 days after it bit Savage. I remember reading that somewhere. I'm like, what? Okay. All right. That's kind of sad. But like I said, when this happened, there was blood running down Savage's arm, and that snake looked pissed. That snake looked pissed off, and it was really, really a messy situation. They tried it again with Jake once he went to WCW and he got in this feud with Sting. I remember there was something where he was doing the whole Cobra thing again, and the Cobra turned on him, kayfabe, and it wasn't, we were already like, we'd already seen it, it was like, okay. But the whole thing of it really is a very powerful image, and it's extremely disturbing to see Savage, helpless in the ropes, basically, and this cobra just gnawing away on his arm. It's completely messed up. When they would show it, like, again, like, it's like everything else. It's like, oh, it's so horrible and terrible, let's show it again. They actually they had to put a big X on screen because, people were calling their television stations, and a lot of that stuff really irritates me, that whole kind of pearl clutching, think of the children kind of thing. But this was one case where I was like, okay, that might have gone a little bit overboard. Just a little. Okay, fuck it, a lot. But it made for really interesting TV, I gotta say. Although I am sorry the Cobra died. There was also Frankie. Frankie was a macaw who came down to the ring with Coco Beware when he was under that was, part of his gimmick, the Birdman Coco Beware. And he would come down to the ring with this beautiful macaw, mostly blue with yellow highlights and such. And he's a very friendly bird. He would, sit there and flap his wings and stuff. And Coco did this dance that basically looked like the dance that, it looked like the bird from Purple Rain, the dance Morris Day does. And there's a song called that. And Frankie was a beautiful bird. I always like macaws and parrots. I think they're beautiful, and they're so smart, and they're, friendly birds if you're nice to them. And, Frankie didn't do very much other than sit there and look beautiful, because what are you going to do? Have the bird go in the ring and peck somebody's eyes out or something? No. Just have him be there and have him be part of Coco's gimmick. And Coco really did care for him very much. Unfortunately, Frankie wound up dying because Coco's house burned down, and Frankie, unfortunately, was killed in the fire. And I think that's very, very sad. One other animal mascot that I'd like to bring up, although, I mean, this one was done for mostly, I would think, for shock value. Obviously, some people do the whole, it's a shock thing. Kevin Sullivan and his group of Army of Darkness type people back in the day, when he was doing the whole satanic gimmick in Florida, which never would fly, like, on a national level at the time, they had snakes with them because snakes are, people, like I said before, people think of snakes as evil and stuff like that. It's, it's a cultural thing. I think it stinks because snakes are beautiful and smart. But someone that had another thing with them that I think most people would be like, yeah, you stay over there with that, would be Victoria, when she was wrestling in TNA under the name Terra, which was short for Tarantula. No, we thought it was short for Tarara Boomdier. She actually had a tarantula with her that she kept in a cage, or she took out and let it walk on her. A tarantula named Poison. Okay. I think spiders have venom, not poison, but I guess they were worried about calling the spider Venom because then, Marvel, lawyers, stuff like that. I've also heard that the spider was actually her spider. That was her pet. Good for you, I guess. We'll go with that. Like I said, spiders obviously have an important, part to play in nature's, tapestry and stuff like that. That having been said, I'm not picking up a tarantula. No, absolutely not. Those things are just, they look some of them do look beautiful. Some of them are, beautiful colored fur. Is it fur? No, I don't think it's hair. They have like beautiful hair. And, no, still not doing it. No. Other people have used animals that weren't named or have only used them one time. So I thought I'd talk about those two, and those would include Ricky Steamboat. Now, Ricky Steamboat was in a feud at one point with Jake Roberts. This got to be an extremely nasty feud, including one time when Jake did the DDT on Ricky and I believe gave him a concussion because it was on the floor. So Ricky, when he came back from his injury, I believe, decided he was going to fight fire with fire. Now, by this point, he was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Okay. Now, I don't know which was worse, the whole animal part of it, or when they actually had him dressing up as a dragon, including breathing fire, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, this is just embarrassing. You're so much better than this. But, they had come up with this whole Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. At one point, the dragon thing was in tribute to Bruce Lee because, if you can throw a tribute to Bruce Lee in anywhere, I say do it. He was amazing. But to combat the evil Jake and his evil snake Damien, Ricky started bringing his own dragon with him to the ring. Now, I have seen different pictures of said dragon, and I am kind of sure they use different animals at least twice. I might be wrong. One of the pictures, it looked more like an alligator to me. The other picture, it looked like a monitor lizard. Neither of which are things you want to fuck with, but they're not dragons. And also the fact that the WWE, if I remember correctly, were intimating that it might have been a dragon, or like a Komodo dragon or something like that, which there is no fucking way that was a Komodo dragon. And like I said, I'm not sure if they actually came out and said that, or if it was intimated. But I do know that there was, talk about one of the I believe the monitor lizard, they actually taped its mouth shut and used a tape that you couldn't see on camera. Which I was like, I'm not comfortable with that at all. I mean, I'm like, if you're not going to let the animal, have free motion, don't use it. That's how I feel for whatever reason. Like I said, I'm not sure, like, some of the pictures it's very difficult to tell, but, you know, if anybody out there has their own opinion, I'd like to know. There's also, this one I don't like talking about because, I can't look at it. But we have to bring it up. And they're not named because how can you name all of them? There's so fucking many. And that would be the Boogeyman and his little buddies, the worms. Ugh. Wow. I mean, I understand, being passionate about your art and wanting to really live your character and all this stuff like that, but I cannot come up with any health benefits to putting live worms in your mouth. It's just, blah. I mean, I would watch the Boogeyman. I'd rather watch him like smash his face against that big clock that he used to carry than see him with the worms hanging out of his mouth and spitting worms on people or putting worms in people's mouths and I'm just like, worms, no. Absolutely not. No. And before anybody out there screams at me, I know worms are important. I know they provide a valuable service of churning up the soil and being food for birds and things like that. So don't yell at me. I know that, but I don't want to see a whole fuck ton of them. And I certainly don't want to see them hanging out of some dude's mouth. Blah! Just gross. Sometimes people have used animals as part of their gimmick in ways that I completely don't get. Now, there are a few cases where it actually worked. I mean, it was only done once, but it worked. I want to bring up one of the times where it worked. It was only done the one time, but I thought it worked really well. That was at WrestleMania 9. WrestleMania 9 was the WrestleMania that was done in Las Vegas. And it was, the whole Caesar's Palace thing, and there was a lot of, really glitzy stuff with this, and also the imagery of Bobby Heenan on a camel. Anyway, I'll call Bobby Heenan, also someone that knows about animals, because his nickname was the Weasel. He actually was posing with weasels sometimes. And basically all a weasel is a mink with, not as good PR. But when the match occurred between The Undertaker and Giant Gonzalez, and the less said about the actual match, the better. We'll just focus on the in-ring entrance of The Undertaker, who came out accompanied by a vulture. They had him coming out in this kind of like chariot thing, and it looked really, dark and scary and stuff like that, even though it was daylight outside, and they had this very large vulture on a perch next to him. And I have to say, it made a really striking image. You had The Undertaker with the long hair and the black coat and the hat and all that, and you had this big bird with the big black wings, and it would flutter its wings every once in a while. And vultures are usually thought of, obviously, as a symbolism of death, of dying, of, rotting and stuff like that. And it really worked with the character of The Undertaker. It actually worked a little bit better than it did when they did it with Sting, because they actually did have him with a vulture as well. One of the earlier times that they had Sting come back after the whole "I don't trust you" thing between him and Lex Luger with the NWO, where everyone was convinced, except the audience, that Sting had, joined the NWO, and it turned out he hadn't. It was just someone dressed like him and all this stuff. And then we start seeing Sting up in the rafters. And he's not the gregarious surfer dude Sting we'd seen before. He's this very dark figure and this, dark clothing. He's got dark hair now. His face is painted, white with these black markings, which looked entirely too much like the Crow for me. I really felt like this is insulting the memory of Brandon Lee. Nobody asked me that, of course, but I made it very vocal at the time. And there was one time when he's up in the rafters and standing up there with a vulture on his arm. And I was like, why a vulture? Why not a crow? I'm like, well, and they can't, I'm like, you know, they can't call him the vulture because, again, Marvel lawsuits. But, I mean, I just like the Undertaker's thing with the vulture better myself. This one, I remember when this happened, and I also remember being like, what? During WCW Super Brawl, they had a wrestler, unfortunately, who's no longer with us, Matt Bourne. Matt was a journeyman wrestler and played the original Doink the Clown, appeared in ECW in his Doink makeup as a character called Born Again. It was kind of creepy. And but at one point, he's known for those, but at one point he also appeared in WCW as a character named Big Josh, which I'm not saying Matt was a small man by any stretch of the imagination, but big, you think a guy like Kevin Nash's size, and Matt wasn't that tall anyway, but he was a lumberjack. He was like this, you know, he had the flannel shirt. He was this big, gregarious guy that lived in the woods, and he was all, you know, happy to be wrestling and just really perpetually smiley guy. And he came to the ring at Super Brawl with bears. We're back to bears again. He's leading these two bears out. These bears are walking on their hind legs, and they're muzzled, and they've got, you know, leads on and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there going, this is not right. I was just completely like, I don't like this. Thankfully the bears did not stay at ringside. They just, you know, they walked down to the ring with him, and then somebody came and took them back, probably their handler. We never saw him with the bears again, as far as I know. I just thought it was stupid. I mean, I just thought it was dumb. I was like, okay, we get it. He's from the woods. Fine. You know, I just thought it was ridiculous. I'm like, I'm like, what the hell is next? You're going to have him come out next week with a raccoon, you know, or something like that, or a beaver, or a moose, or whatever. Thankfully, they did not do that. Another person that I was like, I don't actually remember this. I did research and I saw a picture of it, but I'm like, I don't remember this at all. Was Scott Steiner. Scott came to the ring at one point in WCW with a tiger. I guess it was to, like, you know, the whole genetic freak thing, and he's such a wild man and all this stuff like that, you know, he's such a badass, he can walk down there with a tiger, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, oh, why? And all I'm thinking is that poor tiger. And that's not a slam on Scott. Oh my gosh, please don't think of that as a slam on Scott, because he still terrifies me. My whole thing is whenever they've done things with animals, in wrestling, I always get very nervous for the animal, because they're in situations where they can't feel comfortable. You know, there's all these lights and noise and people and scents and things like that. And my heart would instantly go out to the animal. That's the way I am. Okay, this is, the last part of this. Just for silly's sake, not like this show's been super serious. Anyway, obviously some people have incorporated animals into their wrestling nickname, or their wrestling nicknames, or, you know, that's part of their name or whatever, because of whatever kind of character they are. Somebody like I mentioned, like Jake the Snake Roberts, where his whole thing was that he was devious and sly, like a snake is supposed to be. Again, rude. That's being very species-centric. Another person with a slithery nickname like that would be the Viper, Randy Orton, who is also referred to as the Apex Predator. I don't think vipers are apex predators. I think that would be like a shark or something like that. But whatever, you know better. The Shield at one point were referred to as the Hounds of Justice, which was really ironic because they were the heels. It stuck with Roman Reigns, who was referred to and still referred to as the Big Dog. And shout out and much love to Roman. We hope you're doing well. And also there was obviously the Road D-O-G-G, the Road Dog, because apparently pot makes you spell badly. Sorry. I'm sorry. That was really mean. And that is not a slam on Road Dogg as a performer or on the mic. He was great on the mic, fun as a performer, and please don't smack me. This one's sad. This one makes me sad. The pit bulls, they obviously had a gimmick of that. That was their gimmick, that they were, strong and tough like pit bulls, and they used to come to the ring with dog collars on and, chains around their neck and stuff like that. I don't know if Taz is sort of an animal nickname. It's obviously it's short for the Tasmanian Devil. Side rant. I'm sorry. This is what happens when you poke the animation nerds. And this is not to say I don't love Looney Tunes. I do. Looney Tunes are fantastic. But I always wondered if the people that drew Looney Tunes ever actually looked at a Tasmanian Devil, because they don't look nothing like Taz. They are scary looking little fuckers, and they make this horrible noise. I mean, I'm sorry. I know I said I love animals, and I do. I think animals are wonderful and fantastic, but man, the noise that Tasmanian Devils make, wow, that's like torture. I would be remiss to not bring up the name of the Rabid Wolverine, Chris Benoit. Obviously, they gave him that nickname because Wolverines are supposed to be tough and very, very strong animals and stuff like that. And if it works well for Marvel, it apparently worked for Chris at one point. There's way too many people out there with animal nicknames that I can't remember everybody off the top of my head, but you had the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, obviously. Tiger Mask and all of the other tigers out there in Japan, which was, this is a long-standing character and a very revered character. The Ultimo Dragon, obviously, Ultimo Dragon, which translates to Last Dragon, which, I always thought was a very cool name, and I also thought he had some of the coolest masks ever. An animal name that I never got, and I have to be perfectly honest, and I feel badly about saying this because he is not with us anymore. Before he became the Ultimate Warrior, and before he changed his name to just Warrior, when he started in wrestling, actually it was after he started, when he first started, he was a member of a team with Sting. When he first got noticed in World Class Championship Wrestling, the Ultimate Warrior went by the name the Dingo Warrior. To this day, I don't know why. I don't know why. I remember seeing him on TV going, what? Dingoes are not traditionally things that people would be very afraid of. Maybe he just thought it sounded exotic or whatever. I'm like, you do know that's a dog, right? It's a dog. I really thought Ultimate Warrior was a real big step up name-wise. I have to bring them up because I think their gimmick is so weird and I love it to pieces. The Colony. Soldier Ant, Fire Ant, and all these guys, and the fact that they just, I don't know, I loved that gimmick when I saw it, when I was seen from Chikara and stuff like that. And I have to bring up Super Beetle, because I follow him on YouTube, and he is awesome. You could even, like I said, look at somebody like Gorilla Monsoon with a nickname like that, and there's been so many people with so many animal nicknames or things like that, and I have to bring up, before I close this off, because my husband brought it up and he was like, you have to use this in your show, so I am using it because I love my husband and want to make him happy. Then, of course, there was Pepe. Pour one out for Pepe. Pepe was the stick horse that Chavo Guerrero was carrying around for a while in WCW, when Chavo had this kind of freewheeling, loosey-goosey child personality thing happening. And he would come to the ring with Pepe, and people would chant for him, and Pepe met a very sad end in a wood chipper. But so there, honey, I mentioned Pepe. Are you happy now? So, what do you guys think of animals in professional wrestling? Did I miss anything that you thought I should bring up? Was there any moments that you were like, wow, that was really amazing, or man, that was stupid? Is there anybody that I missed when I was talking about nicknames? I'd love to know. PlatinumRoselle@yahoo.com. If you'd like to send me any sort of email at all about your opinions about wrestling, where things are going, where things are, and such like that, I'd love to hear that too. As I mentioned, PlatinumRoselle@yahoo.com. And I would like to talk about some of the other shows we are involved with. I have another solo show called Platinum Rose's Garden, which is my Supernatural podcast, where I look at the past week's episode of Supernatural and talk about it. So my show will be coming back this week because we are coming off of the winter hiatus, and I will be coming back with the episode Nihilism. And it's a real good thing that I don't drink anymore, because this show would make me just want to climb into a bottle of gin and never come out. I also have another show that is going to be, it's going to be a Patreon exclusive show, although my first show will probably be done so people will come and listen to it. It's called Kaiju Corner, and it's going to be an alternating show with this show every week. And it is my look back at being a kaiju fan since I was a very small child and didn't know what the word kaiju meant. And there'll be other talks about, other horror movies and things like that in there too, I'm sure, because goodness knows I can't stay on a topic for too long. Because my mind works like a pinball machine. And there are other things that we do here on our little family of podcasts that we work on, and I hope you'll listen to them as well. They would include Subject Cinema, which is TC and I's movie podcast. And we also have Front Row 5 and 10, which is our list show. TC has his own solo shows as well, including Catastrophe, Vortex, and also 3 Minute Weekend and Tuesday Digidex, which are shows that he is doing about what movies are coming out to the theaters, to Redbox, to Netflix, all those places, so you know where to spend your money. We have other people that are part of our little group as well, including Eric and Valerie over at Cavebabble. They're great people, and I hope you will check them out. And I also hope you will take a visit to Aunt B's Nerd Grotto on YouTube, which is our buddy Anthony Lamberti, who is a very knowledgeable person about figures and pop figures and comics and stuff like that. He's a great person, and I hope you'll check him out too. And we have some dramatic works out there if you'd like to take a listen. We have Manhattan Hammerdown As It Happened, which is a dramatic reading of what else was going on in New York City the night that Clover came ashore. And we also have our rendition of the H.G. Wells classic, The War of the Worlds. So I hope you'll check those out. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, you may do so at PlatinumRoselle@twitter.com. You can also check out my fanfiction over on fanfiction.net. And we should have some other things coming along on Patreon soon. Hopefully, you can check them out as well. And if you would be so kind as to like, share, and subscribe our information, we would be really, really thrilled if you would do that, because we want more people to listen to our shows and become part of our little island of misfit toys. So, that is going to wrap up this week here on Ring Around the Rosie. I hope you guys will be back in a couple of weeks when I am back for another show. I'm Kim Brown, and I'll see you later. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Ring Around the Rosie with Kim Brown, a production of PNRNetworks. Keep in touch with all things about the show at http://ringaroundtherosie.net. Ring Around the Rosie intro performed by Eric Lyon. Ring Around the Rosie theme by Digital Juice. Join Kim for a new Ring Around the Rosie every Wednesday. Ring Around the Rosie is copyright 2018 PNR Networks, Boston, Massachusetts, USA.
Podcasting's choice. From coast to coast, continent to continent, right here 24/7.